I knew that this wasn't going away. And people go, oh, well, we'll be going Monterey. I said, Monterey's canceled. I know it's canceled. And I didn't say anything because I have so many friends who are stakeholders. I didn't want to be bad news. I'm like, this is not going to happen. So I'm like, yeah, there goes a year. I was talking to some friends of mine in the hobby, and they're like, well, yeah, this isn't going to be a year. One of them is a doctor. He's like, yeah, Pebble Beach is a pipe dream. And I went, okay. So I was looking at Facebook one day, and my friend Vu Gwen, who's the PCA, chairman of the PCA, executive director of the PCA, I think is his real title. And he put up this little video he put up called Cars and Coffee on the Carpet. And it was little die-cast cars, and he put them on his carpet, and he made a video. And I said, oh, this is really funny. And I have some. I had like probably 10. So I put them all out. And I said, hey, I got one too. He's like, that's so cool. And I was thinking about it. And this is like, I know what it is. It's March 28th of last year. I'm thinking, what if you had a concours for toy cars judged by Concours judges? Because the Concours judges, like, name one of the big Concours, Paul Russell, Ken Gross, name, anybody, right? Bill Warner. They're not doing anything, just like me, because they're in the same boat as I am. So everybody's free. And so I called up Vu, and I said, so I'm going to steal your idea and do something with it. He goes, what are you doing? I said, you're not stealing it. It's your own idea. You just took it to the next level. I said, great. You cool with that? He goes, yeah. I go, okay. So I called, who'd I call? I called Bill Warner, but he wasn't my first call. I called Michael Furman, the photographer, up. I said, hey, so if I made a die-cast car concours where you're judged on Facebook for model cars, would you do it? He said, would you be a judge? He goes, oh, that sounds totally fun. So he said yes. Then I called Tommy Kendall, who's a pal. I said, hey, so got this crazy idea, and since none of us are doing anything, would you judge this thing? He goes, oh, that'd be great. So he said yes. And then I called Paul Russell up from Paul Russell and Company. I said, so if I did, he said yes. And so I called Warner up, and I said, hey, Bill, so I've got this harebrained idea for this concours of toy cars for concours. Do it online, and people judge it, and people like you. He's like, that's a great idea. That's the craziest idea I've ever heard, and it's a great idea. And Bill Scheffler, who founded Fairfield Concours, told me the same thing. He goes, that's a crazy idea, and it's brilliant. And I went, okay. I go, well, I don't know what to call it. And I was thinking I'd call it Concours de Carpet. He goes, yeah, but that's I get where you're going with that. But it's that, but what if you call it something different? I said, okay. So we were brainstorming. He goes, how about Isolation Island Concours? And that was the name. And I said, that's the perfect name. And so we launched it on April Fool's Day of 2000, very appropriately. And we put it out there. I had one sponsors from my insurance agency, Haydenwood Insurance. And the other sponsor I had was Motorology, who does many different car things. Video presentations. They do the back end with what we're using right now, the tools you're using right now, for people like Keith Martin's podcast and things like that. So he also does T-shirts and hats and artwork and all that. It's a wonder. Motorology is a great site. And they were our other sponsor because my friend Matt is a friend and a client, and he agreed to help. So he created my logos. We made little awards about this big for each car that were scaled to the size of the car, that were custom made for each owner in each car. And so we launched this thing. We said, okay, what's going to happen? And I said, hey, donate to a charitable organization affected by this situation that you choose. I don't care who it is, but give a donation and give like $5 or $1, whatever you can. If you can't afford anything, you don't have to give anything. But if you can, give $1 to $5 to a charity. And we put it out there on Facebook. And I messaged about 100 of my Facebook following friends saying this was there. And that's the extent of the marketing we did. And in the first round, we had 285 entrants. And I went, huh. And so I made McKeel, McKeel Hagerty, my head judge. He did it the whole time. It was fantastic. And he gave me a lot of his time, and his time is very valuable. And he was just terrific. We had a blast doing it. And Bill was one of my board of advisors. Bill McKeel and Bill Warner, Bill Scheffler, and McKeel were on my board of advisors. They were kind of people that helped me steer the thing because they'd all run Concours, done things like this, and so they were very, very useful. And just terribly gave me a lot of time. So we did this thing, and we gave out awards, and we did it. The first time we did it, we just did the text on Facebook because we did it on Facebook because Facebook was the only place. I played on the internet in business before, and I knew that the only way to do this after talking to a lot of friends rapidly was to do it on Facebook. If I wanted to execute immediately and get it and be first out of the gate with something around this deal in our hobby space that we could all do, Facebook was the only solution that was a cost effective that I could actually do because I could just build a dang page and figure it out. And so we did that. And we had all these entrants and they all won and people all cheered and we got all these followers. There's like 3,000, 4,000 followers on the thing still. And then we did it again. And I didn't have any sponsor, no one was, my insurance agency was sponsoring the awards and that was it. But we didn't have we had other costs, we had mailing costs and all this stuff. And so I had like Tom Plazinski from BMW, and, Eric Keller from Enthusiast Auto Group, which was like the greatest place to buy a BMW M car. He has the best ones on the planet. They were my BMW judges. So I said, Tom, does BMW want to sponsor this crazy thing? And he goes, yeah. And I went, great. And so then I called Rob Moran at Mercedes, who was one of my judges. I said, Rob, does Mercedes want to sponsor this thing? And they said, yeah. And I called Ray Schaefer. I said, would Porsche want to sponsor Isolation Island? He goes, I think so. And so he hooked me up with the club thing and they sponsored it too. I'm like, and I talked to Hagerty and they're like, well, finally, after 2 rounds, you finally ask us. And I said, it just didn't occur to me that it would go more than 2 rounds, because we were doing it like every 2 weeks. We did 1 round, 2 weeks, another round. I was like, wow. And so what we did, we first learned it was 60 hours a week of work. My friend Dirk de Jager, who was my co-founder, who I brought in to do my initial photography and to help out with it, we kind of ran it together. I ran the head of it, but he filled in my gaps all over the place. And when we needed example photography for class 3, he'd shoot his diecast collection in his studio for the presentation because we didn't have any, because no one had done it, right? So we didn't have any template photography to use for examples. And so he's a brilliant car shooter. And so he shot these amazing photographs of his collection that looked like real cars. So we did this thing and we got sponsors. And so people kept on donating and we started getting people that had won Pebble multiple times as entrants. Many of them. And people know. So you get like the John Shirleys and people involved, right? Literally. You're just dropping names. They were in it. Peter Gleason, who has a very exceptional collection of race cars and BMWs primarily in Seattle. Another tremendously nice guy and got to be great friends. But, I think we had 6 Pebble Beach winners, best of show winners entering their toy cars in our concours. And really going after it. And, but what it did is it gave these people something fun to do and people made friends that had never met. And we made a $350 price cap on the cars. And so what it let it do is that you couldn't just buy an amalgam model for $10,000 and win because it wasn't legal. And we had a couple people try to enter stuff that wasn't legal. One of them is a very big collector and I sent him packing and he never came back. I'm like, that's fine. I asked Bill about it. I said, well, he's a big deal. And Bill's like, you're the king. It's your show. What you say goes. And I said, that's very much thanks for doing, but we're not doing this. And he probably, I know I'm going to run into it this year and I'm going to get some heat from it, but I'm okay. He's not a client. So we did this thing and people made friends. The entries got better and better and you were looking at the page. So you saw some of the quality of these entries, right? And they got really good, really fast. And what's great is the pictures are great and they're beautiful, but the stories these people told about these cars and these toy cars, like this guy. Here's my perfect example. This is my favorite all-time ever diecast car and favorite LMP race car ever. It's the V12 LMP art car. And it says, protect me from what I want. Lack of charisma can be fatal. The unattainable is invariably attractive. You are so complex, you don't respond to danger. It's got all this great stuff on it. I've loved this card since BMW did it. It's got all these funny sayings on it. Protect me from what I want is the best one, even though it never worked for me. So the stories of why people love these things, it's often like, my dad had a Reliant Scimitar, and it was I remember growing up on it, and this is the same color as his, and this is the story of our time with this real car, and how I bought this car to connect with it. Or I watched the 1967 Sebring race, and this car won, and I recreated the scene of 1967 Sebring that I got to watch when I was 3 years old. And just these extraordinary editorial tales of passion and love for the hobby came across. And what's interesting is I was on a panel with Sandra Button and a number of others from other concours about the impact of online concours. And they said the one thing that was lacking from theirs was the community aspect. People didn't get to talk and share and get to be pals. Ours did. Because we put the darn thing on Facebook, comments happened. And people would have dialogues, and they'd get to know each other, and they'd share other stories. And wow, I had this too, and here's my story. And like we put people together globally around the world who had never met, who are now fast friends. So we had that walking around Pebble and meeting people experience virtually, and nobody else pulled it off because they all built websites. And we only used Facebook because it was the only solution. It was we didn't want to. I mean, I know what good web design is. That was not good web design.
It was quick and cheap.
You betcha. And we had a budget of my credit card, right? So it was coming out of my pocket. But we also raised over $100,000 for charities, which blew my mind.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, it was just, and again, we've tried, our whole idea is none of my friends in any part of the hobby were having any fun in March, April, May, June, July, August, because we weren't going anyplace. And I just wanted to make fun for everybody. And people had fun. I mean, when I went back to the 6th and 7th round to Ralph Gilles from Mopar, who is the head of Mopar, he's not even the head of design, he's like the big cheese now, and he'd still show up to judge with enthusiasm. That's huge. Or Bobby Rahal, who was a judge, or David Hobbs, who was a judge, or Bill Warner, who was starting to prepare for his own 2021 Concours. They always gave us the time. And it was just because they saw what we did, I think. We got nominated for an Octane Award last year. Octane Magazine does an award and we didn't win it, but we got just getting nominated. We made the short list with Pebble Beach's Virtual Concours with the one that they did at Peterson. With the Peters, we were in the same league with Peterson Virtual Concours. So I felt like we did pretty well by just showing up and being mentioned.
This has been Jeff Stearns, Connected Through Cars.